Hello, everyone. I'm Victor Glass, your host for today's webinar, Zen and the Art of Rate Design, a Case Study. This webinar is produced by Rutgers Center for Research in Regulated Industries, CRI. Its mission is to promote research, scholarship, and education in regulatory economics aimed at improving public policy. Please visit our website. The center has been in existence for more than 40 years. It was founded by a distinguished professor, Dr. Michael Crew. And I'm the current director and the host today. The main focus of today of CRI is on utility regulation, which includes electric utilities, water, gas, postal, and telecom. Next slide. This webinar is basically a follow-up to a previous one that had the same name without the case study attached to it. It's available on YouTube, so please check it out. It explored broad issues related to pricing that fell into four categories, including cost of service, a service design, equity, and provider of last resort obligation. And here, we're going to explore these issues using a concrete example, and that's why we call it a case study. And the panelists have been asked to evaluate a three-pronged proposal for restructuring of electric utilities in California for net energy metering customers. And the proposals boil down to three changes in rate design. One is a grid benefits charge, which from telecom, I call it an access charge to the network. Lowering of compensation for exports to the grid. Basically, NEM customers would move from retail to wholesale rates, and then a customer charge to replace a minimum monthly bill and meter charge. Please move it. Next, okay. So based on the first webinar and these three rate change proposals, the panelists and I and the moderator have come up with 5 categories of questions. If raising the monthly fixed charges is economically efficient, shouldn't they apply to all customers? Second, how would raising the fixed charges affect other green initiatives, such as home installation? Why pick out NEM customers? Why maintain a 3-period time of use rate structure instead of moving towards real-time pricing? And how should subsidies to low-income customers be reconfigured if fixed charges are introduced? Finally, what level of compensation for solar exports to the grid is appropriate? Is it wholesale, retail, or something in between? Next slide, please. So the moderator and panelists will address these questions, and probably in a broader context. You know, we're using the California proposals as a jump-off point. The moderator today is going to be a returning moderator who's done this many times, is Gene Fox. No, move back. Is Gene Fox. And the panelists include some new speakers, some stalwarts from the past, and just in alphabetical order, they're Brendan Batts, Ahmad Farooqi, Gordon Kaiser, Jim Lazar, Amparo Nieto, and Trisha Pridemore. So next slide. I'm going to give you a very bare bones thumbnail sketch of each person's background who's part of the panel, the webinar today, because I want to save time for the actual meat of the discussion. So Jean Fox is an adjunct professor at Columbia and at Rutgers. She served as a commissioner for the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. She was its president. She was a member of the government's governor's cabinet from January 2002 to 2010. And the one that sticks out most for me is she's a member of Rutgers Hall of Distinguished Alumni. I really like that. Next slide. Brendan Batts is vice president at Gable Associates, has over 9 years of experience on state energy efficiency, EE policy, utility regulation, energy markets, electric rate making, utility resource planning, and utility sector efficiency programs. So he's covered a wide range of issues. He appears as an expert before state regulatory commissions. He previously held positions at the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, at FERC, at Maryland Public Service Commission, and Indiana Office of Utility Consumer Counselor. Next slide. Ahmad Farooqi, one of our stalwarts, is back again. He has over 40 years of experience working on rate design issues, including time of use and dynamic pricing. He's worked on rate design issues for 100 clients, more than 100 clients over in 5 continents. He's testified on net metering issues in several states and has been tracking developments in jurisdictions, most notably California and Hawaii. In 2019, he became a prosumer, and he paired an 8 kilowatt solar system with a 9.8 kilowatt hour battery storage system at his house. So he has some personal experience with being a net NEM customer. And he is on mandatory TOU rates, and he's all in. Besides this, he has a Tesla, so he's all in on the electric transition. Next slide. Gordon Kaiser is going to give us the Canadian perspective. He's an arbitrator, mediator, practicing in Toronto and Washington, D.C. His practice includes domestic and international disputes in energy, infrastructure, telecommunications, competition, law, and technology. And before the meeting, we were discussing telecommunications going way back. He serves as vice chairman of the Ontario Energy Board for 6 years. Prior to that, he was a partner in the Gowlings law firm for 25 years, where he appeared before the courts of 5 provinces in Federal Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court of Canada, and regulatory commissions across the country. Next slide. Jim Lazar, another one of our stalwarts, and with a somewhat different perspective than Ahmad. He's based in Olympia, Washington. He's worked on educational training and technical studies for the electricity around the world. Jim is the author of the electricity regulation in the United States, plus important handbooks on electric cost allocation, rate design, and utility resource planning. And I've read just about all of his publications. Jim is retired from the Regulatory Assistance Project in 2020 and continues to work for a very limited number of clients. And currently he's a fellow at Pace University Institute for Energy Democracy. Next slide. Amparo Nieto, another one of our presenters and a long-term CRI member, is an economist with 25 years of regulatory consulting experience in the energy industry. She's directed many types of studies on enhanced time of use, multi-part tariffs, dynamic rate options, and for electricity customers, including those with distributed energy resources. She is Senior Director at Energy and Environmental Economics, E3, where she recently co-authored a white paper, Alternative Rate Making Mechanisms. Oh, go back. Back. Hello? Alternative rate making mechanisms for distributed energy resources in California on behalf of the California PUC and is part of the NEM 3.0 successor rate proceeding. Next, please. And Trisha Pridemore joined the Georgia Public Service Commission in 2018. In addition to electric and natural gas regulation and policy, she currently chairs the Telecommunications Committee and focuses on telecom matters, including rural broadband. She is also the NARUC liaison to the University of Wisconsin School of Public Utilities. In 2020, Pridemore was appointed to the U.S. Department of Energy and NARUC Natural Gas Partnership, a partnership designed to facilitate the exchange of information on emerging regulatory and technological solutions. Next slide, please. So the format is the discussion will be moderated by Jean, followed by open discussion. Please turn off your microphone and video cameras, and importantly, please direct your comments to Jean through the Q&A window. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to Jean, and she'll take it from here.
Thank you, Victor. You've done a great job putting this fantastic panel of experts together. These are individuals who are national experts, but even international experts, and some of them consult nationally. And obviously, we have a fine Canadian amongst us as well. Our discussion today is on the specific elements of rate reform, i.e. part 2 of what we did before. And it's specific, though, how it applies to residential solar customers. A lot of the states, including my home state of New Jersey, are going through this. And these are experts on this panel who understand this from around the country. California has always been a leader. It's basically a huge entity unto itself. It was the 5th largest economy in the world. And so we're looking at what they've been doing as a start-off point. As Victor said, there's a case study, but this isn't the only thing that the panel will be discussing. And the California PUC recently put out, it required a 3-pronged proposed rate restructuring for net metering customers, or we'll refer to them as NEM, net energy metering customers, by the electric utilities. So we've asked the panel to comment broadly on some of the elements of this proposal from California and what's going on there, and compare them to development and to the other countries around the country and the other states. And a lot of states are working on this to get the solar right. And obviously it's kind of cutting edge, and it's important to our future because of climate change. So we're going to, each speaker will talk 5-7 minutes. They have the same questions that Victor just went over with you, and we're going to go in order that they know. Jim Lazar, you're first. Take it away, Jim.
Thanks very much, Jane. And it's great to be with all of you. Zoom is covering the slideshow mode here. This California rate process is troubling to me as someone who's written extensively about the history of regulation, and I really like to return to some foundational issues here. I'll start with 4 foundation cases that define regulation. One versus Illinois, where the Supreme Court said that states could regulate public service companies, and specifically for the purpose of preventing the exercise of monopoly pricing power. In Hope and Bluefield, the court said that public service companies are entitled to a reasonable opportunity to receive a fair return on their prudent investments, but not speculative type profits. And in Market Street Railway, the court ruled that if a public service company's properties become economic because of evolution of technology, that the public service company is not entitled to recover its uneconomic costs from its captive remaining customers. I co-authored a book, Smart Rate Design for a Smart Future. It's available for free download at raponline.org. And there are three guiding principles of smart rate design: universal service, time varying, and fair compensation. The first principle of universal service is that a customer should be allowed to connect to the grid for no more than the cost of connecting to the grid. And by connect to the grid, I mean just that: the final connection between the shared grid that serves multiple customers and the customer premises. The second principle is time varying. Customers should pay for power supply and grid services in proportion to how much they use and when they use it. Refrigerators run all day and all night. They have one cost pattern. Air conditioners only come on when it's hot. They're more expensive to serve. And some loads, like electric vehicles, we can control when we charge them. And the third, fair compensation. And that's a lot about what we're talking about today. Customers delivering services to the grid should receive full and fair value, no more and no less. But a lot of analysts talk about recovering utility fixed costs as though there's something special. An old oil-fired power plant has relatively small fixed costs and lots of fuel costs, but it's being replaced by a solar farm and a battery bank, which provides exactly the same function, giving us power when we want it. But it's essentially all fixed costs. And throughout the industry, fixed and variable costs are increasingly interchangeable. How do other industries recover fixed costs? Oil refineries, hotels, airlines have big fixed costs. They recover them over the product they sell, 1 gallon at a time, 1 seat on an airplane at a time, and 1 hotel room night at a time. That's how markets work. We use a lot of other grids. You know, the stuff at Home Depot comes to us over a global grid, as does clothing at Macy's, groceries at our supermarket, gasoline, and we pay for the production, transmission, and distribution costs in the volumetric prices we pay when we buy their products. That's how markets work. That's what regulation is charged with emulating. So now I'll hit on Victor's questions. First, if raising the fixed charge is economically efficient, shouldn't they apply to all customers? Well, this is the universal service principle. If the fixed charge includes the cost of connecting to the grid, the meter, the service drop, the line transformer, billing and collection, that makes sense. And California has a $10 statutory limit. And if we're talking about fixed charges in that range, yes, everyone should perhaps have that in their basic tariff. How would it affect other green initiatives, such as home insulation? It would clearly have an adverse impact on customer payback period to increase the fixed charges and decrease the per kilowatt hour charges. Why maintain a 3-period time of use rate structure? This is a graphic from a RAP publication that Ahmad worked with us on that showed the results from about 100 different pilots. And we found that time of use rates produced about a 10% reduction in peak load. The critical peak pricing rates up to 50% if there's technology support, smart thermostats, smart EV chargers, smart refrigerators. We know that TOU rates work. Whether a 2-period or 3-period rate design is ideal, I personally think that peak time reward, as Maryland is doing, is a very promising option, but we know that TOU rates work. How should the subsidies to low-income customers be reconfigured? Well, the first step would be to waive the fixed charge. That gives everyone an equal benefit and doesn't interfere with the conservation incentive of the underlying pricing design. Customers would still see an incentive to use electricity carefully. Finally, what level of compensation for solar exports to the grid is appropriate? Well, the answer is value of solar is the correct compensation level. And what I'm showing here is a decision that just came out this week from the Kentucky Commission, where they set the export rate to include energy, ancillary services, generation capacity, transmission, distribution, carbon costs, environmental compliance costs. They even looked at job benefits. They didn't put a value on it, but directed the company to study that, the local macroeconomic benefit. And the answer is about $0.10 a kilowatt hour, just about the same answer that Minnesota came up with a few years ago. So if that's my answer to that question. This stuff is complicated and we need to think hard about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Is that a picture of you there? Being very pensive. Okay. Thanks a lot for kicking that off. You gave a good overview. Trisha Pridemore from Georgia Commissioner is now next. Georgia, you ready? Trisha?
Yes, I'm here. Good
Okay.
to see you,
I called you
Jean.
Georgia. Nice to see you.
No, I'm Trisha from Georgia. So it's good to be with you all today and the opportunity to work on this case study somewhat. So I just wanted to give you all some initial points of view. So the objective of rate design is to produce efficient investment in the infrastructure of utilities to be able to help end users, promote efficient energy use and storage, and reduce the effects of regressive taxes on low-income customers. In California, the three major electric utilities propose to restructure rates for NEM customers. The restructuring includes a grid access charge, lowering their compensation for exports to the grid, and an additional fixed charge. The proposal would also maintain a 3-point TOU rate. This proposal raises important policy questions that we should address. For example, if fixed monthly charges are economically efficient, shouldn't they apply to all customers? How would raising fixed charges affect other green initiatives such as home insulation? Why maintain a 3-point TOU rate structure? How should the subsidies to low-income customers be reconfigured if fixed charges are then introduced? I think we had a technical glitch there. And then what level of compensation for exports to the grid should be appropriate? So some vast differences between California that's used in this case study in Georgia is that as a member of the Georgia Public Service Commission, I'm responsible for overseeing Georgia Power. They're a vertically integrated utility, meaning that they generate, they distribute, as well as they also maintain a customer relationship. So for me as a regulator, I'm interested in just how different California and some other states are from the way that we do things in Georgia. Lots of times folks say that the way that we do things in Georgia is more traditional than how utilities used to be managed. But it's also allowed us the opportunity to invest in the system, not only reliability of transmission, but also in invest in generation. And as our state's population has grown substantially over the last 5 years, that's given us the flexibility to go in and make investments in the system. Currently, our rates in Georgia are 15% below the national average, but I know that you can't say the same thing in California, where the rates are substantially higher. We also operate off of a fixed charge that's given out every month as part of a Georgia Power customer's bill. It's currently $12. We agreed in the 2019 rate case to move that to $14, and that will be implemented at the end of this year. Those fixed charges allow us to do more to ensure reliability within the system. They also allow us to invest in transmission. And there's also a great customer benefit of that as well. Even though we have close to 11 million citizens in Georgia, we have about almost 3 million, 2.6 to 2.7 million that are currently Georgia Power customers, but they work closely in partnership with our co-ops, where we have 41 co-ops that represent 4.4 million customers. We also are served across our state by municipals, and they also work closely with Georgia Power, particularly on generation and in distribution. What it really interested me about the changes and the differences between what we're seeing and happening in California and in Georgia is that Georgia has, like I said, a vertically integrated utility with a regulatory structure, where California is a deregulated market for electricity. I mean, I know from experience of talking with my colleagues across the country that are in deregulated markets, they spend more time looking at the price per watt. And we look at the price per watt, but we look at the overall system in its totality. And that gives us the flexibility to do more in terms of reliability and ensuring good customer outcomes. I'd also say that one great difference too is that California is part of an ISO. We are not. We have fought that for many years and been able to show that through partnerships and connectivity to neighboring states to be able to support generation and transmission needs, that's been able to give our customers the best value. With the California proposal, it appears that utilities are seeking to recover a reasonable amount of these fixed costs from customers who are relying on the utility system for reliable backup service when they cannot generate enough for their own needs. We have recently in the state, we have deployed net metered solar. We did it in the 2019 IRP and rate case. And right now we have about, at that time we had about 2,000 customers with net metered solar. We do think that we'll reach the 5,000 customer threshold that was put forward in the rate case by the end of this rate case term. We go back into another full-scale rate case with Georgia Power next year. But we are looking forward to determining just how many customers are going to take advantage of the net metered program that was established. And we'll see how we continue to grow in net metered solar across the state. Our state is one of the top states in the country for solar. It has all been voluntary. Our voluntary solar program is predominantly utility scale solar. We do have community solar options as well. So if someone doesn't want to actually go through the expense of being able to have solar on their property, they can also subscribe to one of the community solar programs that we make available. We have in total 9 solar programs available to customers that are customers of Georgia Power. And we believe that that flexibility has provided us the opportunity to really see substantial growth within the state and in our use of solar.
Well, thank you, Trisha. It's nice to know that the South is coming along on this because you're awfully sunny down there with all your peaches. I appreciate that. Is Gordon on now?
Yep, I'm on.
Okay, Gordon, take it away. This is Gordon Kaiser, Energy Arbitration, but he's Toronto and in Washington, and a Canadian, and an experienced Canadian. Take it away, Gordon.
Okay. Well, I don't have much to say about California, although I lived there for 10 years, and it's a wonderful place. I say you only 2 reasons why people don't live in California. They've either never heard about it or they can't. But let me just tell you a bit about Canada. It's 10% of the United States, roughly the same population as the state of California. It has 9 provinces as opposed to 50 states. The federal regulator here is not nearly as powerful as the American federal regulator, the FERC. But when it comes to this little exercise, net metering, it's interesting that the issues are more or less the same. How much can you export to the grid? What's the price? Are there fixed charges? These kinds of things. Are there access charges? And I would say that the most aggressive and successful jurisdiction in terms of this type, in terms of net metering, is British Columbia. And British Columbia is sort of the California of Canada. These people that grow up on the Pacific seem to have a different attitude, and they're very much aligned with climate change objectives. It is the only jurisdiction in Canada that has removed the limit on how much you can export. And that's mainly because the British Columbia Utilities Commission takes its directions very carefully from the provincial government that, as I said, has the most aggressive goals. The other thing that's interesting, and I was interested in the comments just a moment ago from Georgia, is that, and I threw this in the little paper I threw together, that if you read the IEA most recent report, their view is that we're not going to meet these goals that either President Biden or Prime Minister Trudeau have come up with in April, unless we move quickly with some of the existing renewable energy, and they point to solar and wind in particular. And I think in one of Farooqi's papers, he says there's 2.2 million residential solar rooftops around the United States. In Canada, it would not be anything near that. I mean, it's not even 100,000. So one of the issues that people are starting to weigh in on here is, listen, these goals are all very nice. These targets are very nice, but how the hell are we going to make them and meet them in any shape or fashion? And so some conversation and discussion and analysis is coming back to this whole net metering thing. And one of the things that we have never got to community net metering. Ontario put in place fixed pricing, flat rate fixed charges on the promise that community net metering is going to come. Of course, it never came, and it still hasn't come, even though they've had two different regulatory proceedings to support it. So one of the things that's a raging discussion right now is, why don't we let the local distribution companies do it? The Toronto Hydros, in Edmonton, it's called EPCOR. In Calgary, it's called NMAX. Some of them are provincial hydros that operate across the other entire state, like Quebec Hydro and BC Hydro. It used to be Ontario Hydro. They changed the name, but there are a lot of big municipalities that have their own local distribution companies. And there's some interesting discussion on that. I think the difference in policies between the provinces are not much different than the states. If you look at Alberta, which is an oil-producing province, they hate anything that has to do with conservation. I don't think I'm overstating it. But other jurisdictions, British Columbia is a big hydro jurisdiction, as is Quebec, a big hydro jurisdiction, export a lot of power to the United States, hydropower. So they're all on board when it comes to renewable generation, because they, quite frankly, have it coming out of their ears. But those that have none of it and are earning big money exporting oil as opposed to hydroelectricity, they, of course, have a different view. But I guess the bottom line, from my perspective, is the days of wrangling about rates for net metering, I think, are going to be over, and there's a bigger discussion that's coming, is how do we get this increased solar output that we're going to need onto the grid in the quickest and shortest possible time. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. I appreciate that. And I think that really is a big question that we'll be getting to soon. How do we get this increased solar that the presidents of the United States and the Prime Minister have promised to do? And a lot of us want to do it, even though we also have in the US states who prefer to still sell coal or use oil and would not help with the carbon emissions. All right, our next speaker will be Amparo Nieto. She's with E3, which is Energy, Environmental, and Economics Inc., and she's an economist. Amparo, take it away.
I would like to just start by saying that I'm happy to be in this meeting, in this forum, in this webinar today. I'm going to be aware of the limiting the time that each of us has. So keeping in mind the questions that Victor has asked all of us at the onset of the meeting, I'm going to use a little bit of a few visuals so that you can see the relevance of this topic in California. But as you know, this is not just an issue in California. It's just that it's almost most relevant here, not only because of the aggressive transition to a net zero scenario where we want to transition towards 100% renewable clean policy, but also because of the inequity issues, the concerns about equity that are inherent to the current residential rates. Next, please. So I would like to start again by showing you a sample of what is the current situation in California. California moved to default time of use rates for residential customers, meaning that if you look at the blue columns here in this chart, you can see that now customers can see time differentiated prices on a per kilowatt hour basis in both seasons, summer, which is a month of June through September, and winter, all other months. And this was a move in the right direction to kind of get rid of tiers, simplify rates, very positive changes. But there are still some distortions and important distortions in price signals that kind of go against best practice rate making, but obviously are a function of the amount of, the statutory limit on how much you can charge customers in California on a monthly fixed basis, and the customer charge is very low. It cannot amount to more than $10. And at the moment, not even that, it's a monthly minimum bill. So all of the cost recovery, the bulk of the cost recovery is done through the volumetric charges. But what I would like to just identify here or visualize for you is the big gap between the by time of use period. You can see that the marginal cost is represented by the yellow column. It's always lower than the retail rate. And this happens across the board in every period, meaning that customers are seeing strong incentive to reduce electricity, but also to adopt solar, rooftop solar, given that they will get to reduce their bill significantly by avoiding these kilowatt hour rates as part of the current net metering situation system in place. So here in this box on the left, I'm giving you some idea of what this means in terms of the delta on a per kilowatt hour basis, kilowatt hour of solar generation. A customer would help the system avoid on average in the year about 5 cents kWh, while it's seeing a bill saving, a bill reduction of about 30 cents per kilowatt hour. So there's a big gap, and that gap ultimately needs to be recovered from all customers and socialized. So there is a concern about misalignment. Next slide, please. So just another quick visual here, just to show how compounding the problem is that in California, the capacity value, really the peak hours, have shifted towards the evening. And so now we have a peak period, which is around 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. And that is actually reflected in the retail time of use rates. But as you can see in the dotted red chart, red line that represents the profile of solar generation, you can see how it is most of the generation of the rooftop solar system is taking place outside of those peak hours in both winter and summer, meaning that, as we saw in the prior slide, these systems are getting compensation based on a kilowatt hour charge precisely in the periods, in the time of day periods during the off-peak and the shoulder or mid-peak, where you can see the largest discrepancies between the retail rate and the marginal cost. Overall, they get to save a lot in the bills, while the cost of the system haven't changed significantly. There is only a small avoided cost, and therefore it is not an efficient solution, and it's not equitable because it tends to it really is shifting cost to customers who either don't have the means to do the adoption of rooftop solar physically or financially. Therefore, there is a strong urge in California to change this. And next slide, please. You can. This is just to find to stress the need to change the way that exports to the grid. Excuse me, I just saw a pop-up here. So there is a need to change the way that exports or energy that is sent back from these rooftop solar systems back to the grid has to be compensated in a way that is disconnected from the retail rate, which currently is too high, inefficiently high. And so avoided cost or marginal cost by time of day period is a good basis for it. And this is something that is almost like a common thread, in a common point or common point in the proposals that the Commission is receiving from all the stakeholders. There's almost a strong support from going towards export rates that are differentiated by time of day and that they are more closely linked to time of day avoided cost. Next. So the last few slides that I have really are talking about how, in addition to getting disconnect in the way that exports are compensated, kind of abandoning the net metering system, there should be a plan in place to kind of also restructure time of use retail rates for all customers, really, in order to get more efficient price signals, rebalancing the cost recovery, moving some of those fixed costs that currently are embedded in the kilowatt-hour charge towards a fixed charge, or even better, creating a multi-part rate structure by which you have more flexibility as to how you recover fixed cost. It's not only gonna necessarily have to be put in a monthly uniform fixed charge for everybody, but we have other tools. We have potential to use grid access charge that is linked to the maximum, for example, the maximum annual demand of the customer. That doesn't change from month to month, but it's a way to kind of differentiate between customer segments. And it is going to take, by doing that, you also take care of, fairness and almost the difference in the income levels of the customer classes, or the customers within the class. So then finally, just say that if you cannot do that change in the default rates for everybody, then it makes sense to start a mandatory rate that is exclusively for mandatory for time solar customers, where they can see volumetric charges set at or close to marginal cost, and make these rates optional for other customers as well. Next slide, please. I think I kind of skipped the point about transitional charge. If you are still, if the regulator feels that the growth of DER is important, and I believe that the California Commission is really interested in continuing a sustainable industry in the distributed energy resource field, there are ways to support the industry in a more transparent way. Any regulatory measure has to take into account what is the best measure that is conducive to the efficient allocation of resources, right? What is the rate that maximizes social welfare? But efficiency is not only the goal, obviously, it's also equity. And what we are trying to take into account here is what is the least cost way of producing that transition towards a clean energy sector. And definitely, if the solar industry needs that extra support, let's find a way to quantify that in a transparent fee that everybody can use to make informed decisions and have a better idea of how that support to the solar industry is going to change over time. Anything that introduces transparency in the way that all customers are priced, and even more importantly, new technologies are priced is going to be critical in any of these discussions. Anyways, I just wanted to highlight 2 or 3 examples here of a multi-part rate structure. One that uses a grid access charge that I like because it is transferable to all customers, and it really again linked to the maximum size that the transformer needs to have in place to serve a given customer. There are ways to do this easy for the customer. There are ways to introduce a sensor so that the customer is aware when he is reaching his maximum demand. Anyways, we could talk about these rate structures, and I don't have enough time here, but I hope that this kind of introduces a point of discussion here today. And then basically just wanted to wrap up by saying electrification is a very important goal. So this proposal of lowering kilowatt-hour charges is actually helping with the incentives for customers to adopt electric vehicles, to adopt heat pumps, and to help kind of increase the average use of the system, while not putting pressure on the capacity needs for the grid. Battery storage is coming up next, and anything that helps put in the customer's radar the idea that the on-peak usage is the most costly, and you can actually reduce your bill by targeting those hours, then is going to be beneficial for all the system and for all for all customers, right, in the end. So I think that I will just leave other points for the Q&A, but basically it is important to support low income, and then we have to find a way to do it in the most reasonable way. Efficient.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. You gave a good overview of what's going on in California, which is something that obviously everybody needs to hear if they're not from California. Our next speaker is Brendan Batts from Gable Associates. He has experience not just in New Jersey, where Gable Associates is located, but actually nationally. Brendan, take it away, please.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, first, I want to thank Victor for inviting me to participate in the panel. Very distinguished group here, and I think it's going to be a very good discussion. I have just a couple minutes, so I'm going to kind of cycle through a few slides that I prepared on these issues. I have a bit of a different perspective than the last speaker, so I think that'll make this a good discussion. So in the interest of time, I'll skip this slide about Gable Associates, but if you want to learn more about our firm and what we do, please feel free to follow up with me after the discussion today, or go to our website at gableassociates.com. So first, a little table setting. The current situation right now in the U.S. And the rate perspective is, we're in an unprecedented era of both consumer and utility technology. Consumers are more connected now than they ever have been to the world outside of them and their own energy use. This is through smart appliances, smart thermostats, and even through smart toothbrushes, which I just found out about recently. And utilities are also in an era of unprecedented technology through advanced metering, advanced analytics, which allows enhanced marketing, and more connected to their customers now than ever. We also have now rate design experience, 4 decades of study on rate design that includes numerous pilot studies of different rate designs. So we know, I wouldn't say with certainty, but with near certainty about how customers are going to respond to rates, how well they understand them, what they like and what they don't like, how customers are satisfied, and then how to best market rates to customers in a cost-efficient way. Even with all of this, though, going on, most customers are still on flat rates. And we continue to see what I think are bad rate design proposals focused on high fixed charges. And that brings me to California. So, you know, I'm going to speak to really just a few questions that Victor had raised, mainly on the fixed charge aspect of the California proposals and some other proposals that are similar. But this slide shows really a table of what is being proposed by the utilities in California right now for NEM 3.0 on the fixed charge side. So you can see that the utilities are proposing a fixed charge between $12 and $24. I'm sorry, a customer charge between $12 and $24 a month, which is much higher than the $10 limit in state law. And then they're also proposing a grid access charge, which would be collecting these amounts per month per kW of installed solar capacity at the premise. So for a customer with a 5 megawatt system installed on their home, you're talking about a fixed charge that is nearing $80 a month, which would be the highest fixed charge for any solar, non-solar residential customers in the country. And, you know, I think the other thing to consider here is that this discussion is really around NEM customers or where to move forward with that. But it's my understanding that California state law requires all new residential construction to have solar. So really what we're talking about is rate design for any new construction as well. I think that's an important consideration. One other thing on this slide is these changes in fixed charges, as well as the change in the export credit, would basically change the paybacks from, this is according to the utilities, from around 4 years to 15 years, which is a substantial change. And I think we could all, reasonable people could argue about solar tariff design and what that should look like. But I think a 15-year payback is going to discourage a lot of investment from existing solar customers or potential existing new solar customers in California. And it's really a question of how much new solar does the state want to bring on, at least on residential rooftops. Some other recent proposals I wanted to highlight very briefly is a couple other proposals more focused on fixed charges. These are more mass market. The first one is a recent study out of UC Berkeley, which is proposing an income-based fixed charge to recover most costs that would range from $0 to the lowest income customers to nearly $200 for higher income customers. And this depends on the utility. And then the remaining costs would be collected through a very small volumetric charge. The other two proposals I have here is a fixed bill plus that was promoted by Brattle last year, and then a subscription pricing program that was proposed by Guidehouse or Navigant a few years ago. Both of these rely on an old rate design called fixed bill, which Georgia Power has the most customers in the country on this type of rate design, but then couples them with energy efficiency or demand response measures to make them more, to give environmentalists or other interveners of that ilk more of an appetite for these rates. I like to call these all-you-can-eat rates because they give customers no price signal about when or how to use electricity. And the experience, at least for companies that have just fixed bill rates, customers use substantially more electricity. I think Georgia Power customers on those rates are using 20% more electricity per year than customers who are on other rates. This slide speaks directly to one of Victor's questions about what are the effects of higher fixed charges on other initiatives like attic insulation. This is from a paper that I wrote in 2017. And the paper was about energy efficiency and electric rate design. But this analysis basically looked at how the payback periods change under different revenue neutral rate designs for different energy efficiency measures. It was based on data from Arizona Public Service for energy savings. Now, this slide is for attic insulation, actually. And the revenue neutral rate designs I looked at were a inclining block rate structure, a flat rate, a few variations of TOU based on different peak to off-peak ratios, and then different demand charges, which were 3-part rates, but not time differentiated. And all of these were looked at under different customer charges. And what the analysis showed is that when you look at this, with the TOU rates of the low customer charge rate or the low fixed charge rate, the payback period was around 10 years. But as you increase the fixed charge and as you move into other rate designs like the demand charge options, it pushed that payback period up to near 20 years and then in a few cases over 20 years. One of these cases that was between 20 and 25 years was a flat rate at a $50 customer charge. which is lower than what is being proposed in the California NEM proceeding. And I didn't even look at a fixed charge as high as is being proposed right now by the utilities in that proceeding. So just to conclude, there are a lot of problems with high fixed charge proposals, including what is happening with the California NEM 3.0 and in these other proposals that I mentioned. And I'll be brief because we're running short on time. But they're not cost-based. They discourage investments in energy efficiency and undercut other state policies, which I just walked through. They reduce customer control of bills because in a revenue neutral perspective, when you increase the fixed portion of a bill, you must decrease the volumetric portion of the bill, which is the part the customer can control. This obscures price signals. And as we know from the decades of study we have on this now, as the volumetric rate increases, customers use less. And as that volumetric rate declines, customers use more. And in high fixed charge proposals, the volumetric rate is always very, very low, which has serious environmental implications because customers will use more, power plants will need to run more, there's increased air pollution, increased water usage, land use implications. And then also this increases system costs over time because the increased consumption also spikes demand, which will require utilities to outlay more capital for distribution, generation, and transmission costs, which is in no one's best interest except for shareholders. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks and I look forward to any questions or comments.
Thanks, Brenda. That was good. I think sometime in the discussion, we might want to get to, okay, if you think fixed charges are not good because they obviously don't encourage people to use less energy, which is critical, what do you prefer? But now we go to the long-term participant in the CRRI panels, Ahmad Farooqi, who has been, everybody knows who he is, I don't want to go into detail. You're last on this panel to talk, and then we'll get into discussion. But take your time, Farooq.
Thank you very much. First of all, am I coming through my voice?
Yes, you look good and you're coming through.
Great. All right. So what I'm going to talk about is the big picture here, which sometimes we lose sight of when we focus just on solar customers. What I'm going to talk about is that California does not just have one cost shift, which is the focus of this webinar, but actually it has 5 cost shifts. So let's dive into that a little bit, but let me, by way of background, because I was looking through the very impressive list of participants. A lot of my friends are there, hello. Some of my adversaries are there, so to speak, hello as well. And it's really an impressive gathering from around the globe, including some from France. So that's very, very nice. By way of background, for those of you who are not intimately familiar with California, I should add, I have lived here since 1974. And what I'm about to say is based on my personal experience, as well as an economist testifying expert experience. Today, California has among the highest electric rates in the country and quite possibly the least reliable grid. The national average rate is under 13 cents per kilowatt hour. In California, one of the off-peak time of use rates has an off-peak rate of 18 cents. Another one has an off-peak rate of 28 cents. And yet another one has an off-peak rate of 35 cents. So just absorb that for perspective. This is the state we are talking about. So what is the first cost shift? The first cost shift is the big hit in the consumer's budget from paying rates that are this high. The average rate is probably around somewhere between 24 and 28 cents per kilowatt hour. Money is being diverted from all other goods and services towards electricity. This is the issue of affordability or equity. Recognizing this, California has created the CARE program. It was way back in time. Today, it discounts electric rates by 35% for low-income customers. Who do you think is paying that cost shift? It's all other customers. So this is the second cost shift that we have between CARE customers and all other customers. Third, an inclining block rate is available in California and has been for a long time. You can have it as a standalone rate, or you can pair it with a time of use rate if you want. We have a default time of use rate that is being rolled out, and you can avail yourself of that, but it will come with this inclining block rate, at least in Northern California. So low users are being subsidized by high users. The former are paying 26 cents per kilowatt hour, and the latter are paying 41 cents per kilowatt hour. So this is the third cost shift. This has been going on since the energy crisis of 2001. Fourth, California spends $1.5 billion annually on energy efficiency. Some customers take advantage of that, and they reduce their usage by quite a bit. And that creates a cost shift between EE customers and non-EE customers. This cost shift has been around since the 1980s, which is roughly when my career began. Nobody complains about these four cost shifts. There is no debate. There are no editorials being written. There's no commentary on NPR. UC Berkeley economists are silent on these issues. California, of course, as we know, wants to go green and fast. As Brendan mentioned, last year it mandated solar roofs on all new homes. In addition, all of the other customers facing these exorbitantly high rates of upwards of 24 cents per kilowatt hour, they want to lower their bills. Who doesn't? Therefore, more than 1 million customers in California are seeking to reduce their electric bills by installing solar roofs. That's half of the national population of solar homes resides in one state, which is the Golden State, which is California. And now we have started having these PSPS events to prevent the wildfire impacts from happening. And a new term has entered the vernacular, which is PSPS. And so customers, the new ones who are putting solar, are pairing them with batteries. As I mentioned, certain parties are now complaining quite vociferously, vituperatively, and volubly that this is creating a cost shift. They're ignoring all the other four cost shifts, and they're totally oblivious to California's commitment to solar energy and to the solar mandate. They're putting all their energies on minimizing this fifth cost shift. Behind all these costs, the cost shifts, is the high cost of electricity in California and the volumetric rate design. It's flat or inclining block, and now gradually an inclining block rate is coming, but it is so mildly differentiated between peak and off peak that not much is going to happen. So my comment is that we need to improve the rate design for all customers in California. Why just on the 10% who have installed solar roofs? The price the solar and non-solar customers pay for buying electricity should be one and the same. There's no point in imposing all kinds of charges on solar customers and not imposing them on the other customers who are either low-income customers who are getting a discount, or low users who are getting a discount through the inclining block rate, or those customers who have invested in energy efficiency. Why are we ignoring their cost shifts? Why are we so pulverized by this particular cost shift that we want to, in a sense, debilitate the proliferation of solar in California when the state is committed to decarbonization? And one of the best ways to do that is through solar. Now, there is a valid issue that needs to be addressed, and that's the issue of what should be the compensation for power that is exported by solar customers to the grid. I think that is a valid issue that's worthy of discussion. But if you're going to change rate design for solar customers for consuming power, we have to do it for all customers. Otherwise, it is an act of discrimination, pretty blatant. And I'm really surprised as a citizen of the state, having lived here for so long, having gone through the 10 years of various governors from Schwarzenegger onwards, all committed to rooftop solar, to suddenly see this reversal coming about and excluding all of the other subsidies and focusing almost like an arrow at the heart of the solar industry. If you lengthen the payback to 15 years or longer, there'll be very few solar installations in the state. Why would anyone do it? So those are my talking points, and back to you, Jean.
Okay, well, we have a lot to discuss and we don't have that much time. We could go on forever. I asked the panelists to look in the a lot of questions coming in. If there's some that you think were relevant and a good discussion for everybody, let us know. I'm going to start with one question. Should the rates for consuming energy differ between solar and non-solar customers? Why or why not? And this is for everybody. So the whole panel, raise your hand, physically raise your hand if you would like to respond. Jim, go ahead.
Thanks. No, this is exactly what regulation was created to prevent, is the exercise of discriminatory monopoly pricing power. If you grow some of your own tomatoes, but you don't have enough, you can go to the grocery store, that is, bear the cost of connecting to the tomato grid, and you pay exactly the same price for additional tomatoes as any consumer does, including those who don't grow their own tomatoes. This is exactly what regulation was created to prevent, and it is the fundamental duty of regulators to prevent the exercise of monopoly pricing power.
Okay, does anybody have a different point of view on that? Amparo. Unmute.
Sorry, I keep doing this. Okay, quickly. Just my point is that I agree with the fundamental principle that Ahmad and Jim have just stated, that ideally you would price all customers in a very neutral manner, technology neutral, regardless of whether you have solar or electric vehicles. But in order to get there, you have to have a rational rate structure, and that's not what is in place right now. So my point is that if you cannot go there quickly, then I think that we need to seriously maintain some of those differentiations in the way you price customers with solar versus non-solar, in order to achieve, to control the amount of cost that it takes to serve the electricity. And I could go very quickly, very quickly to one of the points that is related to this that Ahmad made, which is why are we focusing so much on solar customers? And everybody wants to help the environment, right? And so it's more about a quantification of cost and benefits. And if you notice, the payback period right now for customer adopting solar is about between 4 to 6 years. And then it is assuming that customers need that short of a big payback period before they are committed to adopt solar. And I think that's the problem. That's a problem because there are a share of customers who will be willing to adopt rooftop solar at a higher cost. And then can you quantify how many of those are? Can you quantify the distortions because the company utility scale solar is available, right? So it's also energy efficiency tends to also reduce the maximum demand of the customer. Mm-hmm. And you can see more tangible benefits with energy efficiency than with solar that only really reduces overall volume, but not necessarily the maximum demand of the customer. So that's another point that we tend to forget. Plus, energy efficiency support tends to benefit the most to households who have income problems, right? So they're helping the low-income customers through energy efficiency more than the wealthy. That's another important, to me, an important consideration when we are kind of looking at the holistic.
That's something we need to get to. So Ahmad was very blunt, and he said, as he tends to be at times, that the rate design program totally in California needs to be redesigned because you have all these crazy subsidizing going on, and low users are subsidizing high users, declining black rate, all that. Does anybody disagree that with Ahmad that the whole rate structure in California is, say, not where it should be, and it needs much more than just solar and net metering changes? Does anybody disagree with that? Okay, Ahmad, you won him over. Going to the next question. Should the NEM rules, the net metering rules, be changed retroactively for the over 1 million solar customers in California? I've been a regulator my whole career. I'm now retired officially. but I've always tried to practice prospectively, especially when it comes to small commercial, industrial, and residential. So does anybody here think that it should be retroactive for the residential, over 1 million residential? Ahmad?
Okay, so it has never happened anywhere else, and I am waiting for the day that they go ahead and try to do it and see 1.2 million customers rise on the streets and send them home.
And so does anybody think it's possible they would do that, Jim?
I don't think it's possible. Well, it is possible to do. And in fact, the Salt River Project has sort of done that, and some other utilities that have sharply increased fixed charges for solar customers have done that. Mostly been in places, however, where there's very little solar. So it didn't apply to very many people, and there weren't 1.2 million to rise up. I'll simply note that, 15 years ago, when solar started becoming a big deal, the early customers who installed paid higher costs than those today do. But the central solar systems that made you sign utility contracts got much higher prices then. And they got 25-year contracts at those much higher prices. They're grandfathered in. And I think what regulators are doing with distributed solar customers is essentially giving them the same treatment that central solar customers get. It's in essence giving them a long-term contract by not changing the rules of the game partway through.
Yeah, the early performance.
Just a very quick clarifying on Salt River Project. I was part of that case in 2015, and Amparo actually was there too. And initially they thought they would do it retroactively for the 14,000 customers they had, but they relented and they grandfathered them. That was the term being used. NV Energy tried to do it without grandfathering, and all of the saga that followed. The commissioners were thrown out, everything was turned upside down. So I think retroactive is such a terrible idea that I'm surprised that intelligent people are putting their names on it. And I'm waiting for the headlines when the 1.2 million and their relatives and friends rise up to protest. I think it'll discredit the whole movement, and it could go to the courts.
I think you're talking to a country where we have.
Please, Jane.
What
about the solar customers that are signing up today and they're put on a mandatory TOU rate? Is it a violation of that principle to have the commission change the TOU rate design to, from going to a 2-to-1 ratio of on-peak to off-peak to a 4-to-1 ratio off-peak for the effect that would have on an existing solar customer?
Yeah, that's a legitimate question. Of course, when somebody signs up for solar, they expect a certain economic benefit going forward, and then all of a sudden it's taken away. To me, as a long-term, my whole life as a regulator, doesn't make any sense. Anybody disagree with that? Okay, because we have tons of questions. Okay, so you have a very efficient customer. They don't use much energy. So they don't create any kind of cost shift but they're then not paying their full share of the cost for the grid system. Is there a problem with that? And comparing that to the issue of we're only dealing about solar now, and how about energy efficiency customers? I mean, how will that all play out? Again, that goes to a point that everybody should pay the same, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that was the fourth cost shift that I mentioned. That is the fourth cost shift.
Trisha first and Ahmad. Raise your hand. Trisha, then Ahmad.
Well, based upon the passion that Ahmad has displayed in the last two answers, and I've agreed with both of them, I think that's where this monthly fixed cost and fixed charge comes in. At the end of the day, we're all using the system. I believe it's important that ratepayers, we all pay our fair share. And I think it's important that that word is fair. And to be able to have fairness across the system, access to transmission, access to available resources when needed.
Right. Ahmad?
Yeah, so I was just going to say that that's a great question, and that was my fourth cost shift. So if some energy efficient customer drops their bill down to $50, it used to be $200. then the $150 they have reduced included some contribution to the grid fixed cost, right? To use the terminology that's being used. So how is that any different from a solar customer dropping their consumption down from 200 to 50? So my point is, solar customers are prosumers. They are both consumers and producers. In their role as consumers, charge them the same price that everyone else is. And then the debate should focus on what should be the export price. I mean, Michigan has found a good way to deal with it, right? They have the inflow-outflow model, where the inflow is the same price for all customers, solar or non-solar. Export is based on a formula that tries to approximate the sort of the cost of power being exported, and that's calibrated to either the wholesale market or to the value of solar. I mean, I think that we should focus on that rather than trying to hit the solar customers with a four-pronged hammer. Just hit
And
them.
again, where is that done?
Michigan.
Okay, Michigan. From Michigan. Somebody, Brendan, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, I think your question is based on the premise that everyone owes the utility a specific amount of money every month. And I reject that premise. I don't think customers owe their utility a specific amount a month. I mean, if I go on vacation for 2 weeks in a month and I come back, do I then owe the utility half of what I would have paid in that month had I not gone on vacation? Of course I don't. And I think the same is true for the concepts that Ahmad talked about with solar customers, with energy efficiency, with vacation homes. And I think the idea of raising fixed charges to attempt to cover those costs equally from all customers have serious negative implications that I talk about on my slides about increased demand, increased consumption, the environmental implications of that, and then the future system cost implications of that. So I think there's also cost causation issues as well, because when you charge somebody who's in an apartment, using 200 kilowatt hours, the same price you would as somebody in a 6,000 square foot home, I mean, they're imposing different costs on the system. Why would they pay the same fee? They don't equally owe the utility the same amount of money every month. So I reject the premise of that to begin with.
Okay, well, I'm going to move on. Although I could say that I have a house in New Brunswick and I have a house down the Jersey Shore. My Jersey Shore house takes a lot. I mean, I have solar on both roofs, but still, why should I pay for that system? So when I want to go down there, I can have that because I still have to have that system there. But let's move on. Question that a lot of people are concerned about because of the economy, because of the huge wealth gap in this country, the biggest it's ever been since the roaring 20s, the low minority income customers. So that's been discussed. There's 2 points on this, but how does this impact them? And number one, for them to even be able to have solar. And number two, how does this cost shifting impact them? And what could California or other states do in this regard? Raise your hand. Okay, Amparo. You guys should all just unmute now. So when you want to talk, you can do it.
Oh, I guess your question is how a change in the rates will impact negatively the low income access to solar. There are ways to make it accessible for low income customers, and one way is through community solar and virtual power plants that are virtual solar farms where low income customers can get access to it. So there is one way of doing it through that. And also multi-apartment arrangements so that all of the units in the building are sharing a big solar system. There are ways to price that in a way that helps them, contribute to solar, to clean energy through distributed solar. I think that maybe Ahmad wanted to add something else.
Okay, somebody else? Ahmad? Anyone?
I thought someone else was just. I didn't want to take all the time. I know we're getting.
By the way,
I agree with what Amparo just said. I think the big issue these days is what kind of solar services can be offered to low-income consumers or people living in multifamily dwellings, and I think that is a good topic worthy of discussion for public policy. But I continue to say in California, the low-income community already has a very big discount on their electric rates. Unlike most other states, they don't have 35% discount for low income, and about a third of the population claims to be low income and gets that discount. Secondly, they get virtually free energy efficiency services and low income weatherization services. So, I mean, much as I'm empathetic to that situation, I see that getting a pass, that subsidy, but when it comes to the net metering, I see that getting an F. So why is the grading so tilted? Who is this professor?
I think there's a couple of different issues here. One is that California has generous programs for solar customers, for low-income customers, and that results in a increased revenue requirement to be recovered from other customers. But another part of it is that the overall revenue requirement in California is extraordinarily high, much higher than most other states. I mean, other states in the West, including utilities like Puget Sound Energy and Portland General Electric, which have, unlike other parts of the Northwest, have very little hydro and are fully exposed to the market, have rates that are on the order of half those of the large California utilities. And part of this is that it's expensive to do business in California, but part of it is that the California PUC is generous on the return on equity, generous on the equity capitalization ratio, generous on executive compensation, and generous on recovery of stranded assets. And ultimately, I think the California Commission is going to have to look at the Market Street Railway case carefully and see if part of the solution to all of this is to reduce the revenue requirement.
We're running out of time. Gene,
Oh, no.
is it? Yeah. I just want to end this with a different perspective. You know, I have telecom perspective. See what people think of this, that the electric utilities are providers of last resort. So they have a lot of obligations where they have to provide energy. And even for those who don't use the grid, there's the option of using it. So they have to invest in the grid and they have to operate the grid, and they're facing declining demand. That seems to be an issue that hasn't really been discussed very much. So, so they're in a bind about, you know, how to recover the costs of the network. And they're faced with a lot of political pushback from the solar industry, from other groups that have already invested. So my issue, which is pretty standard for telecom, is why not start thinking about a universal service support fund that would be sized so that the utilities can introduce a rate structure that's cost causative, doesn't rely on cross subsidy of one customer type or another, and this universal service fund could be connected with other funds that are promoting solar. So you try to develop a consistent approach that would lead towards the targets that Gordon was talking about. We're trying to meet some targets, but we need the grid. Why don't you set up a universal service system that would solve a lot of these problems? Just putting that out there in case we want to do a future webinar on it. But any comments about that?
You're still going to have problems because the cost is going to be too high. So middle income families are now having a problem with the cost of telecommunications and cable services because you have massive companies who are in charge of these for the most part. So I really think it's a cost factor that has to be considered. There, some of the things that people have circulated among us are saying that maybe we need to shift EVs from the cost of the utility to some other funding source. How much can utility customers bear? It's happening in the water industry as well. How much can the water? So universal service is a great thing, but you're still going to have costs, and other people, utility customers have to bear that cost. That's a
Yeah,
big
my
issue.
point is that at least make it explicit, see what it is, and then you can integrate it into a program of developing real cost causative rates. But maybe it's pie in the sky.
So I think that that's a very interesting concept, and I wonder to what extent, to follow up on Jean's remark, whether those costs should be shifted into the tax code, which is
Yes.
certainly a UC Berkeley suggestion that has been made. And my response to Professor Borenstein was, are you kidding? California already is one of the highest tax states in the country. How many more people should leave the state because the tax keeps going up? The reality is there is no easy answer. And actually a lot of what Jim said, I agree with. There are significant revenue requirement issues, and people blame the solar customers for creating all this problem. I think that's just pure BS, unadulterated BS. The problem is much bigger than the cost shift caused by the solar customers. And this is just a deflection of the underlying problem. Diablo Canyon, you remember, had a cost overrun of 5 times. And that is when I was in grad school. And the movie China Syndrome partly was triggered by that. I mean, California has its share of debacles when it comes to energy pricing. And so why blame customers who are trying to lower their bills by putting energy efficiency or solar? Let them use whatever options are there. I think this is like very surprising and disappointing to me as a Californian.
I think one of the problems is that the utilities, most electric utilities in the country, have not really figured out how not to get their money from different sources, i.e. the usage fees, which is typical. So very few of them actually are into making alternatives to transmission, to make the distribution system an actual smart grid. That technology is there now. And a lot of them aren't using it because they want the rate base, because they want to make money for their shareholders. That's a fact. And I don't think any state has figured this out yet. Anybody think the state has?
Yeah, I wish they would figure it out, because I mean, I gave a presentation on that topic one time to the senior executives of one utility, and the chief operating officer asked me, what's in it for us? And I wasn't sure what to make of it. I said, you'll have happier customers and you will have a happier commission and you will get perhaps the rate of return you want. So be customer centric in your rate design, right? Put yourself in the customer's shoes. It is not just an engineering exercise that's called revenue requirements. It is thinking about affordability and what customers like or don't like. Customers want to be green too. A lot of the reason that some people are putting in solar is not to lower their bill, but just because they think they are organic and it's the right thing to do. Plus, local sourcing has value too for many customers. And finally, I am converted and I am part of that camp, as you may have figured out. More power to the prosumers.
One last thought, if I have time, is that you know, the role of the regulator when setting regulated prices is trying to get to the outcome on the amount of consumption that would take place if there was perfect competition, if there was no problems or natural monopolies or economic imperfections or economies of scale. So, I mean, the starting point is to try to get to that level of consumption that you would get at if you were pricing equal to marginal cost. And that is a larger amount of usage than you are getting at when you are start piling up cost on that volumetric charge. When you are start increasing the kilowatt hour charge, obviously the usage is gonna be lower. So you are almost artificially restricting the usage that has a value to customers. Let's not forget the basics, because sometimes we don't realize that the starting point, the reason why we have a very high kilowatt hour charges in the first place is because there was not almost price response from customers for a long time. They didn't have options. So there was less of a concern whether we are increasing that kilowatt hour charge or not in an inefficient or inefficiently. Right now, there are more options. We start seeing the customers reacting to it, which is great, but let them react based on cost reflective options. If they see a subsidized solar system that is actually valued at much more than the utility scale, is it really a fair comparison? We're letting them choose the solar system, dropping the bills, raising the bill for everybody else when there is no need for that if you could do it more rational. So I think it's about that. It's about making sure that you take into account the customer reactions to prices, but let them choose if they are willing to pay less for utility and more for solar because they are more environmentally conscious. But let's keep the values of the solar system in alignment with the actual value to the entire system, right? And then if you need to push the industry a little more because it seems that it's stagnated, let's think about a subsidy mechanism that is completely outside of the retail rate per se.
I think we're getting to the
I'm sorry.
end of our hour
And
and 30
Victor,
minutes.
you need to do your concluding remarks and remind people that this information will be available to them. Go ahead, Victor.
Yes, Gene is pulling the strings, so if you see my arms moving, it's all Gene's fault. We'll make this available. This is being recorded. It'll be uploaded to YouTube. For those who have a particular interest in some of the slides, please let us know and we'll send them. And I'd like to thank the speakers and our moderator for doing such a great job. It's pretty clear to me, again, I'm not from the electric utility industry, that there's still a lot of controversy about usage charges versus fixed charges, whether there should be uniform fixed charges or multiple fixed charges. Of course, once you have more fixed charges or any types of more options on rate structure, you have more flexibility, obviously. There were a lot of other questions that came up. Unfortunately, we couldn't answer them, but just keep in touch. And anybody out there that has a topic that they think is compelling, let us know. We're trying to do an ongoing discussion that's aimed at really improving public policy. And that's by no means easy when you have conflicting policy goals.
Victor, there was one question uploaded to what YouTube channel? What did they put
Oh,
in?
we'll send out the link.
Okay, we'll send it out to everybody who participated.
Yes, and there's other, I think Max, who runs these webinars, has also downloaded the chat and others, and we'll see. We'll try to make those available. Okay? Anyway, thank you again, everybody. You were really great.